It started with a sudden interruption. No headlines, no press release, just a former FBI agent on live television, MSNBC. His voice was steady, but you could hear something underneath, something urgent, something personal. "I wasn't planning to do this," he said. "But things have gone too far. I can't stay silent anymore." The host blinked. Viewers sat up, and for a moment, the studio fell completely still. Then, cut. 3 days earlier, on Capitol Hill, the Oversight Committee was in session. Jasmine Crockett had the floor. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Mr. Patel," she asked, looking straight at him, "why is your signature on a contract that transferred internal FBI data to a private server in Florida?" Boom. You could feel it, the air leaving the room. 1 second, 2, 3. No one said a word. Kash Patel, former Trump advisor, blinked twice, then reached for his water. But it was too late. The moment had already taken off, spreading like wildfire. Twitter, TikTok, news feeds. One clip, one question, a single name, Kash Patel. And just like that, the world wanted answers. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't done. That question wasn't just a headline, it was a spark, a door opening into something far bigger than one man and one document. This was about power and who had been using it in the dark. When Feinberg, the former FBI agent, spoke up on national television, he wasn't reading a script. He didn't come to push a party line. He came with a warning. And it all started because of what happened in that hearing room, because of what Crockett saw and what she asked that no one else dared to. Why was an FBI-linked data transfer signed off by a private citizen? Why Florida? Why now? And what happened behind closed doors at a certain resort in Mar-a-Lago just 1 week before that signature appeared? You see, when most people looked at that contract, they saw another bureaucratic form. But Crockett saw something else. A trail, a digital footprint, a silence that didn't feel accidental. The moment she asked that question, on record, live-streamed, and time-stamped, the clock started ticking. Because once you pull the first thread, the whole cover might come undone. This isn't just a political drama. It's not about red versus blue. This is about a system that thought no one was watching. A signature buried in plain sight. A server no one was supposed to ask about. And a man whose name wasn't meant to be said out loud on the record. But Crockett said it anyway. That's when Feinberg realized she had found a piece that was never meant to surface. That's when he went on television, not for politics, not for fame, but because somewhere inside that paper trail, he saw something he recognized, something he once trusted. And now it was being used in ways he couldn't justify. So he spoke, and the moment his voice hit the airwaves, the silence broke. 3 days, one question, and suddenly the FBI was no longer watching from the sidelines. Because when Crockett said that name out loud, she wasn't just exposing a signature. She was pulling the cover off something far bigger. And that was only the beginning. Back in the hearing room, Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She didn't pound the table. She didn't point fingers. She did something far more unsettling. She asked a simple question. "Mr. Patel, do you recall a meeting at Mar-a-Lago on February 14th? A pause. Patel leaned forward, trying to keep his voice even. "That was just a social visit," he said with a half-smile. A few in the room exchanged glances. Crockett didn't blink. She just reached down, pulled out a blue folder, and opened it. Then, with the tap of a remote, the screen behind her flickered on. Security camera footage. Time-stamped. Date, February 14th, location, Mar-a-Lago. Private room, 1 table, 5 men. In the middle, Kash Patel. And right in front of him, papers. A printed draft zoomed in on screen. 4 words circled in red, Internal Access Transfer Protocol. The room went still. You could hear the HVAC hum. Crockett turned back to Patel. Is that what you'd call a social event? He didn't answer. She clicked again. A new image appeared, a close-up of handwritten notes on the side of that same document. This one said, "Ensure access port approved discreetly." She let the words hang, then asked, "Is that your handwriting, Mr. Patel?" No reply, just a shift in his seat, a hard swallow, a tightening of the jaw. Crockett wasn't pressing. She was placing each piece like a tile, each image, each line of ink, each date connected. 5 days after that meeting, Kash Patel's signature appeared on a contract. That contract reassigned internal FBI data access to a private server. The destination, Florida. The timing, precise. The approval, quiet. Crockett looked up again, her voice steady. Who gave final clearance for that server? Patel adjusted his mic, then spoke carefully. I'm not at liberty to discuss internal processes. But that wasn't the question. She wasn't asking about process. She was asking about accountability. He knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. And the screen behind her kept flashing what they couldn't unsee: Patel, documents, notes, a signature. Crockett closed the folder. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply asked one member time, slowly, was that a conversation about dinner or about data? This time, Patel didn't move, because no matter what he said now, the footage said more. The document said more. And Jasmine Crockett, she had only just started. What came next would crack into places even she hadn't expected. Because the deeper she went, the more the ground started to shake, and what was buried was about to surface. Just when the room thought it had seen enough, Crockett reached into her folder again. This time, she pulled out something different. Not a photo, not a recording, but an email. She held it up, 2 printed pages, slightly creased. Then she read it slowly into the microphone. Make sure Patel wraps the hand off before anyone notices. Dan will cover from behind. The silence after that sentence wasn't normal. It was sharp, instant, because no one needed clarification on who Dan was. Dan Bonino, former Secret Service, now Deputy Director of the FBI. The room held its breath. Members of the committee froze. 1 or 2 staffers instinctively reached for their phones, off the record, of course. Crockett didn't explain. She didn't need to. The implication was loud enough. This wasn't just about Patel anymore. It wasn't just about one signature or one meeting in Florida. This was something else, a chain, a system, and someone at the very top ensuring it all moved forward without interruption. Because when a sitting deputy director is mentioned in a leaked internal message, especially one involving a classified data transfer, you don't need drama. You just need facts. And Crockett had them. She slid the email across the desk toward the chair of the committee. Then she paused, letting the cameras focus, letting the gravity land. While the members inside the room sat frozen, the outside world was already moving. Somewhere in D.C., a political reporter at the back of the gallery fired off a tweet. Crockett just touched the deepest layer. FBI. Cache. National data routes. It's not just a hearing anymore. It's a map. Within minutes, that post was everywhere. Because this was the kind of moment the internet doesn't wait to verify, it just runs with it. Back in the room, Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't say, conspiracy. She didn't need to. She simply looked at Patel again, with the same calm voice, same razor-sharp tone. Mr. Patel, how many people knew about that transfer before it was finalized? No answer, just the sound of cameras clicking and something else, something unspoken. The feeling that something buried had just been unearthed. For the first time, it wasn't just Crockett asking questions anymore. Now, everyone wanted to know, who knew what, and when. And more importantly, who was helping make sure no one ever found out. Because the moment she read that email out loud, everything changed. Somewhere in a broadcast van outside the Capitol, a technician hit the delay button. 5 seconds, that's the buffer, just enough to stop something from going live if it gets too real. But they were too late. Clips had already been ripped, posted, edited, shared. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere, on X, on TikTok, on Threads, in private discords. The signature, the meeting, the leaked email, and the name, Dan, circled in red. It was viral before the feed even cut. Then, something no one expected. A live call came into MSNBC. It wasn't scheduled. It wasn't cleared. The producer hesitated, then patched it in. The anchor's voice cracked slightly. We're joined now by former FBI Special Agent Joseph Feinberg. And just like that, the twist wasn't on Capitol Hill anymore. It was on every screen in America. Feinberg's voice came through, low but clear. "I've seen that file," he said. "The one Crockett just showed. It was never supposed to leave the bureau. Period." You could hear the studio go quiet. Feinberg continued, no hesitation now. "I was removed from my post after I asked why Kash Patel had been granted elevated clearance. I didn't get an answer. I got a termination letter." The anchor blinked. Feinberg wasn't done. "That document, that server transfer, I flagged it months ago. And I was told to let it go." Now he was saying it live, unfiltered, with no teleprompter. And just like that, Crockett's question became something bigger, bigger than Patel, bigger than the hearing. It was confirmation from inside, a former agent on record saying the thing everyone else was too scared to say, that the document was real, that the access was special, that someone had silenced him for asking why. Back in the Capitol, the committee chair signaled for recess. But it didn't matter anymore. The story had already left the room. By the time the live feed returned, it wasn't just about a contract. It was about a cover, a name, a break in the wall, and a woman who read one email out loud, just loud enough for the truth to follow. 15 minutes. That's how long she spoke. 15 minutes without raising her voice. No shouting, no slogans, no finger pointing, just evidence, dates, images, paper trails with real names and red ink. She didn't call for prosecution. She didn't ask for a vote. When the last slide faded from the screen and the silence came back around the room, Crockett didn't fill it. She just reached into the folder one last time, pulled out a single sheet, folded neatly, handwritten. She looked at no one in particular. She didn't make eye contact. She simply read aloud, "This isn't about party. It's about power, misused repeatedly." Then, after a pause that felt like thunder in slow motion, she continued, "And it ends today with a name, not a noise." That was it. She placed the paper down, closed the folder, and leaned back. No one spoke, not Patel, not the chair, not the aides, not the cameras. Because the truth wasn't just in what she said. It was in how she said it, deliberate, measured, certain. Crockett knew exactly what she had just done, not by yelling, not by accusing, but by letting the facts take the floor, by refusing to let noise replace consequence. Somewhere in the back, a staffer exhaled quietly. Somewhere else, a committee member closed their laptop. No one needed commentary. The words were already moving fast. Posted, clipped, echoed across millions of screens with a name, not a noise. In a political world full of volume, she chose precision. And that's why it hit harder, because people weren't used to quiet that carried this much weight. And Crockett, she wasn't done yet. She had just drawn the line. Now the question was, who would dare cross it? Or worse, who already had? Black screen, white text. He didn't think anyone would read the logs. She read them out loud. Then, silence, 7 seconds. No music, no narration, just Crockett's eyes locked on the camera. No anger, no fear, only a quiet knowing, the kind of knowing that comes when you realize you've just set off something that can't be taken back. Because this story wasn't about headlines. It wasn't even about Kash Patel. It was about what happens when power is handed out quietly behind closed doors and no one expects to be held accountable, until someone walks in, opens the folder, and reads the truth out loud. This wasn't noise. This was clarity. And in a world drowning in distraction, that kind of truth hits harder than any speech ever could. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is read it and let the silence speak for itself.